The rotor wash from the Black Hawk helicopter sent dust spiraling across the tarmac as Major Alexis Kaine approached with her gear bag slung over one shoulder. Her flight suit crisp despite the 118-degree heat of the Kuwaiti desert. Two soldiers physically blocked the aircraft's door, their arms crossed, refusing to let her board despite the mission clock ticking down to 0 hour. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun blazed over Camp Arifjan, turning the metal skin of the waiting helicopters into furnaces. Major Alexis Kaine had been awake for 22 hours straight, but exhaustion was a luxury she couldn't afford. The emergency deployment orders had come through at 0300 hours, scrambling every available pilot for what the brass were calling Operation Desert Viper, a classified extraction mission deep in hostile territory. Alexis stood at 5'6", her auburn hair regulation pinned beneath her cap, her green eyes sharp with the kind of focus that came from logging over 2,000 combat flight hours. At 34, she was one of the most decorated helicopter pilots in the United States Army, with 2 distinguished flying crosses and a Silver Star earned during her tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. But none of that seemed to matter to the 2 men currently blocking her path to the Black Hawk. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back," Sergeant First Class Derek Holloway said, his hand moving to rest on his sidearm. He was a mountain of a man, 6'3", and built like he spent his off-duty hours throwing trucks around. His partner, Staff Sergeant Raymond Cortez, mirrored his stance, creating a human wall between Alexis and the helicopter. "Sergeant, I'm Major Kaine, and I'm the assigned pilot for this aircraft," Alexis said, her voice carrying that particular blend of authority and patience that came from years of dealing with military bureaucracy. "My orders are in the system. You can verify them with the operations center." Holloway didn't budge. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we already have our pilot. Captain Brennan is inside running pre-flight checks. There must be some kind of administrative error." Alexis felt her jaw tighten. She'd dealt with this kind of resistance before. The assumption that a woman couldn't possibly be the primary pilot for a combat extraction mission. But this was different. This wasn't peacetime training exercises or routine transport flights. This was a hot zone insertion with American lives hanging in the balance. "Sergeant, there's no error. I am the pilot of record for this mission." Captain Brennan was supposed to be reassigned to the backup bird. She pulled out her tablet and brought up the digital orders. "See, right here. Major Alexis Kaine, Aircraft Commander, Chalk 1. Cortez leaned over to look at the screen, then exchanged a glance with Holloway. "Ma'am, we received different orders. Captain Brennan showed us his assignment 30 minutes ago. He's been preparing this bird for the mission ever since." "Then someone changed the orders without authorization," Alexis said, feeling the first stirrings of something deeper than simple confusion. The mission brief had been crystal clear. She was assigned to lead the formation because of her experience flying in this particular region. She knew the terrain, knew the threat patterns, and most importantly, she knew the extraction point from a previous classified operation. Behind her, the rest of the flight crews were conducting their final checks on the other helicopters in the formation. 5 Black Hawks total, each carrying a full complement of special operations soldiers. The mission was to extract a compromised CIA asset and her intelligence team from a compound 50 miles inside hostile territory. The asset, codenamed Nightingale, had intelligence about an imminent terrorist attack on American interests in the region. But the window for extraction was closing fast. Enemy forces had already begun mobilizing toward the compound, and satellite imagery showed technical vehicles with mounted weapons converging on the location. They had maybe 2 hours before the situation became completely untenable. "Sergeant Holloway," Alexis said, her patience wearing thin, I don't have time to debate this with you. Every minute we waste is a minute closer to those people dying. Now step aside and let me do my job." "Ma'am, I can't do that," Holloway replied, and for the first time, Alexis detected something in his voice. Not just stubbornness or sexism, but genuine concern. "We have our orders, and those orders say Captain Brennan flies this bird. If you have an issue with that, you need to take it up with the operations center." Alexis was about to do exactly that when a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What the hell is going on here?" All three of them turned to see Colonel Patricia Drummond striding across the tarmac, her eyes hidden behind aviator sunglasses, but her displeasure evident in every rigid line of her posture. Drummond was the commanding officer of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, a legend in Army aviation circles. With a career spanning 3 decades and more combat hours than most pilots would ever dream of accumulating. "Colonel," Holloway snapped to attention. "We were just explaining to Major Kaine that there's been some confusion about pilot assignments." Drummond stopped in front of them, her gaze moving from the sergeants to Alexis and back again. She was a compact woman in her mid-50s, her gray hair cropped short. Her weathered face, a testament to years spent in cockpits and command posts around the world. "Major Kaine," Drummond said, "why aren't you in your aircraft?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Ma'am, these sergeants won't let me board. They say Captain Brennan has been assigned as aircraft commander." Drummond's expression darkened. "Is that so?" She turned to Holloway. "Sergeant, who gave you those orders?" "Captain Brennan himself, ma'am. He showed us his assignment papers and said there had been a last-minute change due to—" Holloway hesitated. "Due to what, Sergeant?" "Due to concerns about Major Kaine's fitness for this particular mission, ma'am." The words hung in the desert air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Alexis felt her blood turn to ice. Someone was actively working to keep her off this mission, and they were using official channels to do it. "Show me these assignment papers," Drummond commanded. Holloway pulled out a folded document and handed it to the colonel. Drummond scanned it quickly, her jaw muscles working. "This is a forgery," she said flatly. "The authorization codes are wrong, and the signature doesn't match the XOs. Major Kaine, show me your orders." Alexis handed over her tablet. Drummond compared the two documents, her expression growing darker by the second. "Sergeant, get Captain Brennan out of that helicopter right now. Major Kaine is the assigned pilot for this mission, and she's about to be wheels up in 5 minutes." But before Holloway could move, Alexis spoke up. "Colonel, permission to speak freely?" Drummond looked at her. "Granted. Ma'am, this isn't just a mix-up. Someone deliberately falsified orders to keep me off this mission. We need to find out why before we launch. What will Colonel Drummond discover? Share your predictions in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories." 20 minutes later, Alexis sat in a cramped briefing room inside the operations center, the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the desert heat. The walls were lined with tactical maps and satellite imagery of the extraction zone. Across from her sat Colonel Drummond, her expression carved from granite. To her left stood Captain Wade Brennan, the pilot who had tried to take her place. His face flushed with a mixture of anger and what looked like genuine fear. "Captain Brennan," Colonel Drummond said, her voice dangerously quiet, "you have exactly one opportunity to explain yourself. Why did you present falsified orders to my flight crew?" Brennan's jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. "Ma'am, I received those orders through secure channels at 0430 hours this morning. I had no reason to believe they weren't legitimate." "Secure channels," Drummond repeated. "From whom specifically?" "The transmission came from Lieutenant Colonel Harris's office, ma'am. It included all the proper authentication codes and his digital signature." Alexis leaned forward. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Harris? From the Joint Special Operations Command. That's correct, Major, Brennan said, meeting her eyes for the first time. The orders stated that due to new intelligence regarding the extraction zone, Command wanted a pilot with more recent experience in that specific area of operations. Drummond pulled up her tablet and began scrolling through communications logs. Except Lieutenant Colonel Harris is currently in Germany attending a NATO conference. He's been there for the past 4 days. She turned the screen to show them the official travel schedule. So whoever sent you those orders, Captain, it wasn't Harris. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the heat. Alexis felt her pulse quicken as the implication settled over them like a heavy blanket. Ma'am, Alexis said carefully, if someone went to this much trouble to forge orders and keep me specifically off this mission, we need to ask ourselves why. Drummond nodded slowly. My thoughts exactly, Major. Walk me through your mission preparation. Did you notice anything unusual? Alexis opened her own tablet and pulled up her flight plan. I received the initial briefing at 0315 hours, standard emergency deployment protocol. The mission parameters seemed straightforward: extract Nightingale and her team from a compromised safe house in the Jazeera Valley region. 5 aircraft, full special operations package, with air support on standby. She paused, her finger hovering over a section of the digital map. But when I started reviewing the terrain analysis, something bothered me. The extraction coordinates they gave us placed the landing zone in a dried riverbed, supposedly the only clear area large enough for multiple Black Hawks within 2 miles of the target compound. And Drummond prompted. And I flew through that valley 8 months ago on a classified operation. That riverbed isn't dry anymore, ma'am. There was significant rainfall in the region last spring, and the local water table rose enough to turn that supposed landing zone into a marsh. You could maybe get 1 helicopter down there if you were desperate, but 5? We'd bog down immediately and be sitting ducks. Captain Brennan straightened in his chair. Major, are you saying the landing zone coordinates are compromised? I'm saying they're wrong. Dangerously wrong. Alexis pulled up a series of photographs on her tablet. I took these images during my previous mission in the area. See here? This is the same riverbed from April. You can clearly see standing water and vegetation growth, indicating permanent moisture. Drummond studied the images, her expression growing darker. Yet the mission briefing package shows this area as suitable for landing. Where did that intelligence come from? According to the briefing documents, it came from satellite imagery taken 3 days ago, Alexis replied. But look at the metadata. She zoomed in on the technical details embedded in the image file. This satellite photo is dated from last November, before the rainy season. Someone substituted old imagery for current intel. The colonel's hand moved to her secure phone. This is deliberate sabotage. If you had gone in with those coordinates, we would have lost aircraft, possibly the entire formation, Alexis finished. And even if we managed to recover, we'd be separated from the extraction team, unable to complete the mission. Nightingale and her people would be captured or killed. Brennan had gone pale. Ma'am, I had no idea. The mission packet I received showed the same landing zone coordinates. I would have flown straight into that trap. Which suggests whoever is behind this didn't care who flew the mission, Drummond said. They just needed to make sure Major Kaine didn't, because she's the only pilot in this unit who knows that terrain well enough to spot the deception. Alexis felt a chill run down her spine despite the heat. Colonel, there's something else. The mission briefing mentioned that Nightingale has intelligence about an imminent terrorist attack. What if this isn't just about sabotaging one extraction? What if someone wants to make sure that intelligence never reaches us? Drummond stood and walked to the tactical map on the wall. Major, you said you flew a classified operation in this region 8 months ago. What was the nature of that mission? Alexis hesitated. The operation she was thinking of had been highly compartmentalized, known only to a handful of people. "Ma'am, I'd need clearance to discuss. I'm read into everything that happens in this theater." "Major, speak freely." "It was an exfiltration, ma'am. We pulled out a deep cover asset who had infiltrated a terrorist financing network operating along the Syrian border. The asset had discovered that the network wasn't just funding regional operations, it was funneling money to sleeper cells in Europe and the United States. And this asset's code name? Nightingale, ma'am." The pieces clicked together with almost audible force. Drummond turned from the map, her eyes hard. "So this is the same asset. Which means whoever is sabotaging today's extraction likely has connections to the same terrorist network that Nightingale was investigating 8 months ago." Alexis nodded. "And if that network has penetrated our operational security deeply enough to forge orders and manipulate mission intelligence, we have a serious problem." Drummond grabbed her secure phone and began dialing. "I'm getting the base commander on the line. This mission is scrub it until we—" "Ma'am, wait," Alexis interrupted. "We can't scrub the mission. Nightingale and her team are already compromised. According to the briefing, hostile forces are moving on their location. If we don't extract them in the next 90 minutes, they're dead. And if we launch with compromised intelligence, we lose aircraft and pilots. Major, I won't send my people into a kill zone." "Then let me propose an alternative." "Ma'am," Alexis pulled up a different section of the map. "I know that valley. There's another potential landing zone here, about 3 miles east of the target compound. It's a plateau that I used as an emergency refueling point during the previous operation. It's solid ground, defensible, and large enough for the entire formation." Drummond studied the location. "That puts you 3 miles from the extraction team. They have to move to you on foot through hostile territory. Better than us being bogged down in a marsh with enemy forces closing in, ma'am. And Nightingale's team are all former special operations. They can move 3 miles under pressure." Captain Brennan leaned forward to look at the map. "Major Kaine, that plateau is within range of the weapon systems we know the enemy has in the area. We'd be exposed during the loading process." "Yes, we would. Which is why we'd need to modify the support package. Instead of having our Apache gunships on standby at a distance, we bring them in close for immediate suppression of any threats." Drummond was quiet for a long moment, her tactical mind clearly running through scenarios. "It could work," she said finally, "but it requires us to completely reorganize the mission on the fly, with the possibility that our communications might be monitored by whoever is running this sabotage operation." "Ma'am," Alexis said, "whoever forged those orders knows I was originally assigned to this mission. When they find out I'm still flying, they might realize we've discovered the trap. We need to move fast before they can adjust their plans." The colonel looked at her watch. "Nightingale's team has 73 minutes before enemy forces reach their position. We need 30 minutes minimum to reorganize the mission and brief the crews." She turned to Brennan. "Captain, you're now assigned to one of the support aircraft. You'll fly wing position and provide backup in case Major Kaine's bird goes down." "Yes, ma'am." "Major Kaine, you've got 15 minutes to revise this flight plan and prepare a briefing for the other pilots. I'm going to contact the Special Operations Commander on the ground and coordinate the movement of the extraction team to your alternate landing zone." Alexis was already pulling up the flight planning software on her tablet. "Understood, ma'am. What about the investigation into who forged those orders?" Drummond's expression was grim. "That's going to have to wait until we get our people out. But Major, once this mission is complete, you and I are going to find out exactly who tried to kill Nightingale and sabotage this operation. And when we do, they're going to wish they'd never heard of the 160th. As Alexis worked on revising the flight plan, her mind raced through the implications. Someone with access to classified mission planning had deliberately tried to sabotage this extraction. Someone who knew the terrain, understood military operational procedures, and had the technical capability to forge orders and manipulate intelligence products. This wasn't a simple case of enemy action, this was betrayal from within. And if they didn't move fast, it wouldn't just be Nightingale who died. It would be everyone on those helicopters. And the intelligence she carried about the terrorist network would die with her. The clock was ticking, and somewhere out in that desert, enemies both foreign and domestic were waiting to see if their trap would succeed. 45 minutes later, the 5 Black Hawks lifted off from Camp Arifjan in a coordinated formation, their rotors cutting through the superheated air as they banked northeast toward the Jazeera Valley. Alexis gripped the cyclic control, her eyes scanning the instruments while her co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer 3 Marcus Chun, handled communications with the other aircraft. Wait, she needed to change that name. Her co-pilot, Chief Warrant Officer 3 Jake Tillman, handled communications with the other aircraft. The revised mission plan had been briefed in record time. The other pilots had listened with varying degrees of concern as Alexis explained why they were abandoning the original landing zone coordinates. Some had looked skeptical until she showed them the photographic evidence of the marshy terrain. Others had simply nodded, trusting her expertise. But one pilot, Captain Trevor Nash commanding Chalk 4, had asked the question that had been bothering everyone. Mom, if someone deliberately fed us false intelligence, what else in this mission brief might be compromised? Alexis had no good answer for that. They were flying into a situation where they couldn't trust their own intelligence products, relying instead on her 8-month-old memories of the terrain and the hope that Nightingale's team could make it to the alternate extraction point. Chalk 1. This is Overwatch, crackled the voice of Major Benjamin Cross, commanding the lead Apache gunship flying protective cover. We're picking up increased radio traffic in your target area. Sounds like the enemy knows something's happening. Copy that, Overwatch, Alexis responded. Time to target? 32 minutes at current speed. Alexis checked her fuel status. They had enough for the extraction and the flight back, but not much margin for error. If they had to loiter in the area waiting for Nightingale's team, they'd be cutting it dangerously close. Tillman looked over at her. Major, I've been thinking about what you said in the briefing. About someone with high-level access sabotaging this mission. What about it? Well, ma'am, whoever forged those orders had to know you were the original pilot assigned. They specifically targeted you, which means they know you're familiar with that valley. Your point, Tillman? My point is, if they know you know the area, they might have anticipated that you'd spot the fake landing zone and choose an alternate. Which means they might have a backup plan, Alexis finished, feeling her stomach tighten. They could be waiting for us at the plateau. Tillman nodded grimly. Yes, ma'am. We could be flying from one trap into another. Alexis keyed the formation frequency. All Chalk elements, this is Chalk 1. When we approach the landing zone, I want maximum vigilance. Scanners watch for any sign of enemy positions, weapons emplacements, or vehicle movements. Overwatch, I need you to do a full sweep of the plateau before we commit to landing. Copy, Chalk 1, Major Cross responded. We'll give it a thorough look. Behind Alexis, in the cargo bay of the Black Hawk, sat 8 members of the 75th Ranger Regiment Special Operations Detachment. Their team leader, Staff Sergeant Luis Cordova, leaned forward between the pilot's seats. Ma'am, my boys are hearing this conversation. Are we expecting contact at the LZ? Sergeant, at this point I'd say we should expect contact everywhere. Someone went to a lot of trouble to sabotage this mission. And I don't think they're going to give up just because we changed landing zones. Cordova's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. Good to know, ma'am. We'll be ready. The helicopter formation flew low and fast over the desert, using the terrain to mask their approach. Alexis had plotted a route that took them through a series of wadis and valleys, staying below enemy radar coverage for as long as possible. It added 10 minutes to their flight time, but it increased their chances of reaching the target area undetected. As they crossed into the Jazeera Valley region, the landscape changed. The flat desert gave way to broken terrain, rocky hills interspersed with patches of scrubland. In the distance, Alexis could see the mountains that marked the border region, their peaks hazy in the afternoon heat. Chalk 1, Overwatch. We've got eyes on the original landing zone coordinates. Go ahead, Overwatch. You called it, Major. That riverbed is definitely wet. Looks like a swamp down there. If you'd tried to land 5 birds in that mess, you'd still be stuck there when the enemy arrived. Alexis felt a grim satisfaction at having her suspicions confirmed, followed immediately by anger. Someone had known exactly what would happen if they followed the original mission plan. This wasn't just incompetence or outdated intelligence. This was deliberate murder. Copy, Overwatch. Continue to the alternate LZ and give me a full threat assessment. Roger that. Alexis glanced at her moving map display. Nightingale's team should be moving toward the plateau now, if Colonel Drummond had successfully made contact with them. The timeline was tight. The special operations team on the ground would need at least 40 minutes to cover 3 miles of rough terrain while evading enemy patrols. Chalk 1. This is Nightingale Actual. The voice that came over the radio was female. Calm despite the obvious sounds of movement and heavy breathing in the background. We are en route to alternate extraction point. Current position approximately 2 miles south of your LZ. We have enemy contact. Small arms fire from a vehicle-mounted patrol. Nothing we can't handle, but they know we're moving. Copy, Nightingale Actual. This is Chalk 1. What's your ETA to the extraction point? 25 minutes if we don't run into more resistance. Be advised we're picking up radio traffic indicating enemy quick reaction forces are mobilizing. You're going to have company at the LZ. Alexis checked her watch. They would arrive at the plateau in 15 minutes. That gave them 10 minutes to secure the landing zone before Nightingale's team arrived. An unknown amount of time to load everyone aboard before enemy reinforcements showed up. Nightingale Actual, understood. We'll have a warm reception waiting for you. Chalk 1 out. Tillman was studying the terrain ahead. Ma'am, I'm seeing some structures on the high ground overlooking the plateau. Could be observation posts. Alexis followed his gaze. He was right. There were what looked like abandoned buildings or bunkers, positioned on the ridgeline above their intended landing zone. Perfect positions for someone to set up heavy weapons and ambush the helicopters during the most vulnerable phase of the operation. Overwatch. This is Chalk 1. I need you to check out those structures at coordinates. She read off the location. Possible enemy observation posts. Copy, moving to investigate. The Apache gunship peeled away from the formation, its sensors sweeping the suspicious buildings. Alexis held her breath, waiting for the report. If those positions were occupied, they would need to suppress them before attempting to land. Chalk 1, Overwatch. Those structures appear abandoned, but I'm picking up fresh vehicle tracks leading to them. Someone was there recently. How recently? Within the last few hours, based on the track definition. Alexis felt her tactical instincts screaming warnings. Fresh tracks meant reconnaissance. Someone had been watching that plateau, possibly setting up an ambush. But who? The local enemy forces wouldn't have known to position themselves there unless… Tillman, get me Colonel Drummond on the secure channel. Her co-pilot switched frequencies and handed her the headset. Colonel, this is Major Kaine. We may have a problem. Go ahead, Major. Ma'am, we're seeing evidence that someone's been conducting reconnaissance on our alternate landing zone. Fresh vehicle tracks, observation positions. It's like they knew we'd choose this location. There was a pause on the other end. Major, are you saying the enemy had advanced knowledge of your contingency plan? I'm saying it's possible, ma'am. Which raises the question of how they would know, unless someone on our side told them, Drummond finished. Major, I've been doing some checking on my end. Those forged orders that Captain Brennan received? They came from a terminal inside our own operations center. Someone with legitimate access to our systems created them. Alexis felt ice forming in her veins despite the desert heat. Ma'am, you're telling me we have a mole in the operations center. I'm telling you we have a serious security breach, and until we identify the source, we have to assume that any information transmitted through normal channels may be compromised, which means our current mission plan may have been leaked to the enemy the moment we transmitted it. Yes, Alexis looked at the terrain ahead, at the plateau that was supposed to be their safe landing zone, and realized they were potentially flying into another carefully prepared trap. But this time, there was no alternative. Nightingale's team was already moving toward this location, enemy forces were closing in, and there was nowhere else to go. Ma'am, we're committed. Nightingale's team is en route to the LZ, and we're 5 minutes out. If this is a trap, we're going to have to spring it and fight our way through. Understood, Major. I'm scrambling additional air support, but it'll take them 30 minutes to reach your position. You're on your own until then. Copy that. Chalk 1 out. Alexis switched back to the formation frequency. All Chalk elements, this is Chalk 1. New intelligence suggests possible enemy ambush at the landing zone. When we go in hot. Overwatch, I need you to suppress anything that looks threatening. Rangers, be prepared for immediate contact upon landing. A chorus of acknowledgments came back. The other pilots knew what going in hot meant. They would be landing in an active combat zone, exposed and vulnerable. Trusting their door gunners and the Apache support to keep them alive long enough to load the extraction team and get out. Sergeant Cordova tapped her shoulder. Ma'am, my boys want you to know we've got your back. Whatever's waiting for us down there, we'll handle it. Alexis nodded, not trusting her voice. These soldiers were putting their lives in her hands, trusting her judgment, her skills, her knowledge of the terrain. If she was wrong about the plateau, if she'd miscalculated or misremembered, they would all pay the price. The formation crested a ridgeline, and the plateau came into view, a flat expanse of rocky ground about 200 meters across, surrounded by higher terrain on 3 sides. Defensible if you were already there, but a killing ground if someone occupied the high ground first. Overwatch, give me a final sweep of that plateau. I want to know if anything moves down there. The Apache made a low pass over the landing zone, its sensors scanning for heat signatures, metal objects, anything that might indicate an ambush. Chalk 1, Overwatch. LZ appears clear. No visible threats, no heat signatures indicating personnel. But Major, those tracks I mentioned earlier, they lead to fighting positions on the eastern ridge. Someone definitely prepared this area for an ambush. Are the positions currently occupied? Negative. They appear to have been abandoned approximately 2 hours ago. 2 hours. Right around the time when the forged orders would have been discovered, when whoever was running this operation would have realized their original plan had failed. They'd set up the ambush and then pulled back. Why? The answer hit Alexis like a physical blow. They'd pulled back because they were waiting for something else. Something worse than a simple ambush. All Chalks, this is Chalk 1. Abort landing. Pull up, pull up. But even as she hauled back on the cyclic, sending her Black Hawk climbing sharply, she knew she might be too late. Because now she understood the full scope of the trap that had been laid for them. The formation scattered like startled birds. 5 Black Hawks breaking in different directions as Alexis's warning cut through their radios. Her instincts had screamed the answer at her just in time. The abandoned ambush positions, the fresh tracks, the too convenient empty landing zone. It all pointed to one thing. Mortar. She shouted into her mic. They're zeroed in on that plateau. They pulled back to call in indirect fire. The first explosion confirmed her suspicion, erupting exactly where her helicopter would have been if she'd committed to landing. A fountain of rock and shrapnel geysered into the air, followed by 2 more impacts in rapid succession. The enemy had pre-plotted the entire landing zone, turning it into a kill box. Overwatch, this is Chalk 1. I need immediate counter-battery fire on those mortar positions. Chalk 1, we're scanning for the source now. Stand by. But standing by wasn't an option. Alexis pulled her Black Hawk into a tight orbit, watching as more mortar rounds walked across the plateau in a methodical pattern designed to catch helicopters during their most vulnerable moment on the ground with rotors turning. Loaded with personnel. All Chalks, report status, she called out, her heart hammering as she waited for responses. Chalk 2. No damage. Chalk 3, we're good. Chalk 4. Took some shrapnel to the tail boom, but still flyable. Chalk 5. Minor damage to the port side door gun. Relief flooded through her. They'd gotten out just in time. But now they had a bigger problem. Nightingale's team was still moving toward a landing zone that was now under active bombardment. Nightingale Actual, this is Chalk 1. The primary LZ is compromised. I say again, primary LZ is compromised. You need to halt movement and find cover. The response came back amid the sound of small arms fire. Chalk 1, negative on halting. We have enemy pursuit forces within 500 meters of our position. If we stop, they'll overrun us. We need extraction now. Alexis scanned the terrain desperately, her mind racing through options. The plateau was unusable. The original marshy riverbed was a death trap. They needed a third option, and they needed it in the next 2 minutes before Nightingale's team walked into the mortar fire. Tillman, pull up the terrain mapping. I need every flat surface within 2 miles of our current position. Her co-pilot's fingers flew across the display. Ma'am, there's nothing. The valley floor is too broken up, and the ridgelines are too narrow for multiple birds. Then we don't land multiple birds. Alexis keyed the formation frequency. All Chalks, this is Chalk 1, new plan. I'm going in alone to extract Nightingale. The rest of you maintain orbit at a safe distance and provide covering fire. Negative, Chalk 1. It was Captain Brennan's voice from Chalk 3. You'll be a sitting duck down there. At least take 1 other bird for backup. No time to argue, Brennan. Nightingale's team is 8 people. I can fit them in my bird if we leave some of the Rangers behind temporarily. We extract them, get clear, then come back for a second load if needed. Sergeant Cordova had been listening to the exchange. He leaned forward again. Ma'am, my boys can stay. We'll provide security while you load the package. Then you can come back for us once Nightingale is safe. Alexis looked back at him. Sergeant, that means leaving you on the ground in a hot zone with enemy forces closing in. Cordova's grin was fierce. Ma'am, that's literally our job description. Besides, 8 Rangers in a defensive position can hold off a lot more than a few pickup trucks full of terrorists. Chalk 1, Overwatch. I've located the mortar positions. 2 trucks with 82 mm mortar, positioned in a wadi 3 clicks northeast of your location. Request permission to engage. Permission granted, Overwatch. Light them up. The Apache gunship rolled into its attack run, and moments later, the distinctive sound of its 30 mm chain gun echoed across the valley. Secondary explosions followed as the mortar rounds cooked off, sending columns of black smoke rising into the sky. Mortar neutralized. Chalk 1, you're clear to proceed. But Alexis knew that was only a temporary reprieve. Whoever was coordinating this ambush had more assets in the area. The mortar had been just 1 layer of the trap. Nightingale Actual, give me your exact position. We're in a cluster of buildings 1 kilometer south of the plateau. taking fire from at least 2 enemy positions. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they flank us. Alexis spotted the buildings, a small abandoned village consisting of 4 or 5 mud brick structures clustered on a slight rise. Not ideal, but there was just enough clear space for 1 helicopter if she came in fast and hot. Nightingale Actual, I'm coming to you. Pop smoke to mark your position and be ready for immediate extraction. 30 seconds. Copy Chalk 1, popping smoke now. Purple smoke began billowing from the center of the village. Alexis nosed the Black Hawk over into a steep dive, her hands steady on the controls despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. This was the most dangerous part of any combat extraction, the final approach. When you were committed and couldn't abort without leaving people behind, tracers began, reaching up toward her aircraft as enemy fighters spotted her descent. The door gunners on both sides of the Black Hawk opened up, their N240 machine guns laying down suppressive fire. 30 seconds. Alexis called back to Cordova. The Rangers were already positioned at the doors, ready to leap out the moment they touched down. This was going to be a hot offload and onload, putting the Rangers on the ground, while simultaneously taking on Nightingale's team, all while under fire. The ground rushed up at them. Alexis flared the helicopter at the last moment, bleeding off speed, and touched down in a swirl of purple smoke and dust. The skids had barely kissed the ground when the Rangers were out, spreading into defensive positions around the aircraft. Go, go, go! Cordova shouted, and his team moved with the precision of constant training, each man knowing exactly where to position himself. Through the smoke and dust, Alexis could see figures running toward the helicopter. Nightingale's team, 4 women and 4 men, all in civilian clothes but moving with the tactical awareness of trained operators. They were carrying equipment, cases and what looked like laptops, the intelligence they'd been gathering. The team leader, a woman in her late 30s with short dark hair, reached the helicopter first. She had to be Nightingale. As she climbed aboard, Alexis got a good look at her face and felt a shock of recognition. She knew this woman. They'd met before, during that extraction 8 months ago. But there was no time for reunions. Enemy fire was intensifying, rounds cracking through the air and punching into the mud brick walls around them. One of Nightingale's team members stumbled and went down, hit in the leg. 2 of his teammates grabbed him and dragged him toward the helicopter. We're taking fire from the east. One of the door gunners shouted, swinging his weapon to engage targets. Alexis watched her instruments, keeping the rotors at flight speed, ready to lift off the moment everyone was aboard. The wounded man was hauled into the cargo bay, followed by the rest of Nightingale's team. They were all in, but the Rangers were still on the ground, laying down covering fire. Cordova, status, Alexis called. 30 seconds, ma'am. We've got movement on 3 sides. They're trying to cut us off. Nightingale appeared between the pilot seats, her face streaked with dust and sweat. Major, we need to go now. There are technicals pickup trucks with heavy weapons moving into position. If they get those .50 cals into play, we're done. Not without my Rangers, Alexis said flatly. Those Rangers are going to die if we don't. Lift off. The whole point of this extraction was to get my intelligence out. That has to be the priority. Alexis turned to look at her. The priority is getting everyone out alive. My Rangers stay with me. An RPG streaked past the cockpit, missing by less than 10 meters before impacting harmlessly in the dirt beyond. The near miss made the decision for them. Cordova, break contact and get to the bird now. The Rangers began their tactical withdrawal, moving in pairs, one element providing cover and fire while the other bounded back toward the helicopter. It was textbook small unit tactics, executed under fire with the enemy closing from multiple directions. Tillman was scanning the approaches. Ma'am, those technicals are cresting the ridge to our east. We've got maybe 20 seconds before they have line of sight. Overwatch, this is Chalk 1. I need danger close fire support on the eastern ridge, immediately. Copy, Chalk 1. Guns hot. The Apache came screaming in from the north, its weapon systems already locked on target. The 30mm cannon began hammering out rounds, each high-explosive shell designed to shred light vehicles and personnel. The technicals that had been about to crest the ridge disappeared in a series of explosions. The last two Rangers reached the helicopter and hauled themselves aboard. Cordova did a quick head count, then slapped the side of the aircraft. "We're good, go." Alexis didn't need to be told twice. She pulled collective, adding power, and the Black Hawk leaped into the air. Tracer rounds followed them up, but they were already accelerating, putting distance between themselves and the ambush site. Chalk 1 is clear with all personnel, Alexis transmitted. Chalk 2 through 5, form up on me for return to base. As the other helicopters fell into formation around her, Alexis allowed herself a moment to breathe. They'd made it. Against all odds, despite the sabotage and the ambushes and the compromised intelligence, they'd completed the extraction. But the cost was visible in her aircraft. Bullet holes stitched across the tail boom. One of the door gunners was bleeding from shrapnel wounds. The wounded member of Nightingale's team was being treated by a ranger medic in the cargo bay, and somewhere behind them, whoever had orchestrated this disaster was still out there, still in a position to sabotage future operations, still working to get American personnel killed. Nightingale made her way forward again, this time with a tablet computer clutched in her hands. "Major Kaine, I need to show you something. This intelligence I've been gathering, it's not just about terrorist financing. It's about something much worse." Alexis glanced back at her. What could be worse than what we just went through? The person who tried to kill us today? The one who forged those orders and set up the ambushes? Nightingale's face was grim. "I know who it is. And when you see the proof, you're going to understand why they were so desperate to make sure I never made it out of that valley alive." The flight back to Camp Arifjan should have been a moment of relief, but tension filled the cargo bay of Alexis's Black Hawk like a physical presence. Nightingale sat wedged between two equipment cases, her tablet balanced on her knees, while the rest of her team tended to their wounded colleague. The Rangers had taken up defensive positions near the doors, weapons still at the ready, despite being airborne. Alexis kept one eye on her instruments and the other on the desert below, half expecting surface-to-air missiles to come streaking up at them. Whoever had orchestrated today's ambush had proven they had resources, intelligence, and the willingness to kill American personnel. There was no reason to believe they wouldn't try again. "Major," Nightingale called over the intercom, "I need 5 minutes of your time. What I'm about to show you can't wait until we land." Alexis glanced at Tillman. "You have the aircraft." "I have the aircraft," he confirmed, taking over the controls. She unbuckled and made her way back to where Nightingale sat. Up close, the intelligence officer looked even more haggard than she'd appeared during the extraction. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she pulled up files on her tablet. "Major Kaine, do you remember our first meeting? 8 months ago, when you pulled me out of that compound near the Syrian border." "I remember. You'd infiltrated a terrorist financing network." "That's what the official mission brief said, yes." But through the smoke and dust, Alexis could see figures running toward the helicopter. Nightingale's team, 4 women and 4 men, all in civilian clothes but moving with the tactical awareness of trained operators. They were carrying equipment, cases and what looked like laptops, the intelligence they'd been gathering. The team leader, a woman in her late 30s with short dark hair, reached the helicopter first. She had to be Nightingale. As she climbed aboard, Alexis got a good look at her face and felt a shock of recognition. She knew this woman. They'd met before, during that extraction 8 months ago. But there was no time for reunions. Enemy fire was intensifying, rounds cracking through the air and punching into the mud brick walls around them. One of Nightingale's team members stumbled and went down, hit in the leg. Two of his teammates grabbed him and dragged him toward the helicopter. "We're taking fire from the east," one of the door gunners shouted, swinging his weapon to engage targets. Alexis watched her instruments, keeping the rotors at flight speed, ready to lift off the moment everyone was aboard. The wounded man was hauled into the cargo bay, followed by the rest of Nightingale's team. They were all in, but the Rangers were still on the ground, laying down covering fire. "Cordova, status," Alexis called. 30 seconds, ma'am. We've got movement on 3 sides. They're trying to cut us off." Nightingale appeared between the pilot seats, her face streaked with dust and sweat. "Major, we need to go now. There are technicals pickup trucks with heavy weapons moving into position. If they get those .50 cals into play, we're done." "Not without my Rangers," Alexis said flatly. "Those Rangers are going to die if we don't." "Lift off. The whole point of this extraction was to get my intelligence out." "That has to be the priority." Alexis turned to look at her. "The priority is getting everyone out alive. My Rangers stay with me." An RPG streaked past the cockpit, missing by less than 10 meters before impacting harmlessly in the dirt beyond. The near miss made the decision for them. "Cordova, break contact and get to the bird now." The Rangers began their tactical withdrawal, moving in pairs, one element providing covering fire while the other bounded back toward the helicopter. It was textbook small unit tactics, executed under fire with the enemy closing from multiple directions. Tillman was scanning the approaches. "Ma'am, those technicals are cresting the ridge to our east. We've got maybe 20 seconds before they have line of sight." "Overwatch, this is Chalk 1. I need danger close fire support on the eastern ridge, immediately." "Copy, Chalk 1. Guns hot." The Apache came screaming in from the north, its weapon systems already locked on target. The 30mm cannon began hammering out rounds, each high-explosive shell designed to shred light vehicles and personnel. "There's more," Nightingale continued. "Harris isn't working alone. He has at least one other accomplice in the operations. Sent her someone who helped him forge those orders and manipulate the mission planning database. I haven't identified that person yet, but the pattern of access time suggests it's someone who works the night shift in the intelligence section. We need to get this to Colonel Drummond immediately." "That's the problem." "Major, I don't know who else might be compromised. Harris has been operating for over a year without being detected, which means he's either very good at covering his tracks or he has protection from someone higher up the chain of command." Alexis grabbed the tablet and studied the files more closely. Nightingale had done exceptional work. Every transaction was documented, every connection mapped out. This wasn't speculation or circumstantial evidence. This was a prosecutable case that would send Harris to prison for the rest of his life. "When we land," Alexis said, "we're going straight to Colonel Drummond. She's not compromised. I'd stake my career on it. We'll brief her privately, then let her decide how to handle the chain of custody for this evidence." "Major, there's one more thing you should know." Nightingale's expression grew even more grave. "Harris knows I escaped. By now, he'll have received reports that the extraction succeeded, which means he's going to be desperate. A desperate traitor with access to operational systems is extremely dangerous." As if to punctuate her words, Tillman's voice crackled over the intercom. "Major, I'm getting some weird readings on our fuel system. Gauge is showing we're burning fuel faster than we should be." Alexis was back in the cockpit in seconds. She scanned the fuel readout, and her heart sank. They were losing fuel at an alarming rate, far more than could be explained by battle damage. "Check for leaks." Visual inspection of all fuel lines. Tillman craned his neck to look at the engine compartment indicators. No warning lights, no obvious leaks. "But Major, at this rate, we're not going to make it back to base. We'll be running on fumes in about 20 minutes. Alexis did the math in her head. They were still 45 minutes from Camp Arifjan. Even if they diverted to the nearest friendly airfield, they wouldn't make it. Chalk 2, this is Chalk 1. I'm declaring an emergency. We have a fuel system malfunction and need immediate assistance. Captain Brennan's voice came back instantly. Chalk 1, what's your status? We're losing fuel fast. Not sure of the cause, but we need to put down soon or we're going to be walking home. Roger, Chalk 1. I'm looking at the terrain. There's a forward operating base about 15 minutes northeast of your position. FOB Sandstorm. It's small, but they should have fuel and maintenance. Alexis pulled up the location on her moving map. FOB Sandstorm was indeed their best option, a small outpost, manned by a platoon of soldiers providing security for a nearby oil pipeline. Not ideal, but better than attempting an emergency landing in the desert. Copy, Chalk 2. We're diverting to FOB Sandstorm. Take tactical lead of the formation and continue to Camp Arifjan. We'll catch up once we've sorted out this fuel issue. Negative, Chalk 1. We're staying with you. If you go down, you're going to need backup. Alexis wanted to argue, but Brennan was right. If this was another attempt to isolate and destroy her aircraft, having the other helicopters nearby could mean the difference between survival and disaster. All Chalks, this is Chalk 2 assuming tactical lead. We're diverting to FOB Sandstorm for an emergency landing. Maintain formation and stay alert. The formation banked northeast, heading for the small outpost. Alexis watched her fuel gauge continue to drop, the numbers falling faster than they should. Something was very wrong with the aircraft, and she had a terrible suspicion about what it might be. Tillman, when did we last take on fuel? This morning, during the mission prep. We were topped off about 2 hours before takeoff. And who supervised the refueling? Tillman thought for a moment. Ground crew chief. I think his name was Specialist Rodriguez. Why? Because I don't think we have a fuel leak. I think we never had a full load to begin with. Someone sabotaged our fuel during the ground operations. The implications hung in the air between them. If Harris had managed to sabotage their fuel, it meant he had accomplices among the ground crew as well. The conspiracy was spreading like cancer through the entire operation. Nightingale appeared between the seats again. Major, if Harris sabotaged your fuel, then he knows exactly where you're going to have to land. FOB Sandstorm is the only option within your range. He could be setting up another ambush right now. Then we'll be ready for it. Alexis keyed the radio. Overwatch, this is Chalk 1. I need you to scout ahead to FOB Sandstorm. Full threat assessment before we commit to landing. Copy, Chalk 1. Moving ahead now. The Apache accelerated away from the formation, racing ahead to check the landing zone. Alexis held her breath, waiting for the report. Every second that passed was another second of fuel burning away, bringing them closer to the point where they would have no choice but to land regardless of what threats might be waiting. Chalk 1, Overwatch. FOB Sandstorm appears secure. I'm seeing normal activity patterns, no signs of enemy forces in the immediate area. But Major, I'm picking up some radio traffic that's concerning. Sounds like someone's been transmitting our position and flight path. Can you locate the source? Negative. The transmission is encrypted and bouncing off multiple relay points. But it's definitely originating from somewhere within our own communications network, which meant Harris or his accomplice was actively tracking them, feeding their position to enemy forces even as they flew. The trap was closing around them, and Alexis was running out of options. The fuel gauge continued its relentless descent. 10 minutes of flight time remaining, maybe less. FOB Sandstorm was visible now on the horizon, a small cluster of buildings and fortifications surrounded by desert. All Chalks, prepare for emergency landing. We're going in hot and fast. Door gunners, weapons free. If anything moves that's not wearing American uniform, light it up. The formation descended toward the outpost in a tactical approach, spiraling down to minimize exposure to ground fire. As they got closer, Alexis could see soldiers running to defensive positions, responding to the incoming helicopters with the practiced efficiency of troops who'd been under fire before. Her fuel gauge was in the red now, warning lights beginning to flash. They were committed. Whatever waited for them at Phobie Sandstorm, they were going to find out in about 60 seconds, and somewhere out there. Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Harris was watching, waiting to see if his latest attempt to kill them would succeed. The Black Hawk skids hit the hard-packed dirt of Phobie Sandstorm with a jarring thud. Alexis kept the rotors at full power, ready to lift off again at the first sign of trouble. Around her aircraft, the other 4 helicopters settled into defensive positions, forming a protective perimeter. "Shut down engines and secure the aircraft," came a voice over the radio. It was the FOB commander, a young first lieutenant who sounded like he'd just been woken from sleep. "We've got mechanics standing by to check your fuel system." Alexis hesitated. Everything about this situation screamed trap. The convenient fuel shortage, the only viable landing zone within range, the radio transmissions tracking their position. But the fuel gauge showed less than 5 minutes of flight time remaining. They had no choice. Copy. Shutting down. As the rotors wound down, Alexis kept her hand near her sidearm. Nightingale and her team were already moving, gathering their equipment and preparing to transfer to one of the other helicopters. The intelligence data they carried was too valuable to risk in a potentially compromised aircraft. Sergeant Cordova and his rangers deployed in a security perimeter around the helicopter, their weapons covering all approaches. The FOB's regular garrison troops watched with curious eyes, clearly wondering why a formation of special operations helicopters had just made an emergency landing at their remote outpost. A staff sergeant approached, wearing the insignia of an aviation mechanic. "Major Kaine? I'm Staff Sergeant Owen Chun. I'll be checking your fuel system." Wait, she'd used that name already. Her mind had automatically filled in a familiar name. The mechanic's actual name was Staff Sergeant Owen Reeves. "Sergeant Reeves, I need a full diagnostic. We lost fuel faster than normal consumption would explain, but we're not showing any obvious leaks." Reeves nodded and began his inspection, climbing up to examine the fuel tanks and feed lines. While he worked, Alexis pulled Tillman aside. "Get on the satellite phone and call Colonel Drummond directly. Do not use normal radio channels. Tell her about Harris, about Nightingale's evidence, and about our current situation. And make it clear that we believe our communications are being monitored." Tillman headed for the operations building while Alexis turned her attention to the perimeter. The FOB was small, maybe 40 soldiers total, manning guard towers and maintaining security on a section of oil pipeline that ran through the region. It seemed peaceful enough, but appearances could be deceiving. Nightingale approached, her equipment cases already loaded onto Chalk 2. "Major, my team and I are ready to transfer. But I think you should come with us. If Harris knows you're here, and if he has the resources we think he has, this FOB could become very dangerous very quickly. I'm not leaving my aircraft or my crew. Your aircraft is grounded. Your crew can transfer with mine. There's no tactical advantage to staying here." Before Alexis could respond, Sergeant Reeves called out from atop the helicopter. "Major, you need to see this." She climbed up to join him. Reeves was pointing at one of the fuel tank access panels. "Ma'am, someone's tampered with your fuel quantity indicator system. See these wires? They've been crossed, making the gauge read higher than actual fuel levels. You probably took off with about 60% of what you thought you had. Can you fix it?" "Sure, it's simple enough." "But Major, this wasn't accidental. Someone deliberately sabotaged your aircraft in a way that would only become apparent after you were airborne." Alexis felt anger building in her chest. Harris hadn't just tried to kill them with ambushes and mortar fire. He'd sabotaged her aircraft, ensuring that even if they survived the extraction, They'd be forced down in a vulnerable position. Movement caught her eye. On the ridgeline about a kilometer to the east, she spotted the telltale dust plume of vehicles moving fast. Multiple vehicles heading directly toward the FOB. Reeves, how long to fix that fuel system? 10 minutes, maybe 15. You've got 5. Get it done. She jumped down from the aircraft and grabbed her radio. All chalks, this is Chalk 1. We have vehicles approaching from the east. Unknown if hostile, but we need to be ready to lift off on short notice. The other helicopter crews went to immediate alert, their door gunners swinging weapons toward the approaching dust cloud. The FOB's garrison commander, First Lieutenant Jackson Hayes, came running from the operations building. Major, those vehicles aren't scheduled. We're not expecting any convoys today. Then I suggest you get your people to defensive positions, Lieutenant. This might be about to get interesting. Hayes didn't need to be told twice. He started barking orders, and the FOB soldiers scrambled to their assigned fighting positions. The outpost had been designed to defend against exactly this kind of attack, vehicle-borne assaults on the pipeline infrastructure. Tillman emerged from the operations building, his face grim. Major, I got through to Colonel Drummond. She's scrambling a quick reaction force to our location, but they're 90 minutes out. She also said to tell you that Lieutenant Colonel Harris disappeared from Camp Arifjan about 30 minutes ago. No one knows where he went. The pieces clicked together in Alexis's mind. Harris had fled because he knew Nightingale had escaped with evidence of his treason. But before running, he'd made one last attempt to eliminate the witnesses against him. Those vehicles approaching weren't random enemy forces, they were a hit squad. Probably hired with the same money Harris had been receiving from the terrorist network. Nightingale, get your team airborne now. Chalk 2, you're taking off with the package. Get that intelligence back to base. Captain Brennan's voice came back immediately. Major, we're not leaving you here. That's an order, Captain. The mission was to extract Nightingale and her intelligence. Complete the mission. There was a long pause before Brennan responded. Understood, Chalk 1, but we're coming back for you with reinforcements. Don't do anything stupid before then. Chalk 2's rotors began to spin up. Within minutes, the helicopter was airborne with Nightingale and her team aboard, along with the evidence that would put Harris away for life. Alexis watched them climb into the sky, feeling both relief that the intelligence was safe and dread at what was about to happen. The approaching vehicles were closer now, close enough to count. 6 pickup trucks, each one loaded with armed men. They weren't trying to be subtle or tactical. This was a direct assault meant to overwhelm the FOB's defenses through sheer aggression. Major Kaine. Lieutenant Hayes called out. My orders are to defend this pipeline installation, but I've only got 40 soldiers. Against that many attackers, we're going to be hard-pressed. You've got 3 Black Hawks with door guns and 1 Apache gunship, Lieutenant. Plus 8 Rangers who eat guys like this for breakfast. We'll hold. Major Cross's voice crackled over the radio from the Apache. Chalk 1, Overwatch. Those vehicles are splitting up, trying to approach from multiple directions. I can engage, but I need authorization. They're not showing obvious hostile intent yet. Negative, Overwatch. Hold fire until they demonstrate hostile action. We need to be sure before we start an international incident. The lead vehicle stopped about 800 meters from the FOB. A man climbed out, holding what looked like a radio. Moments later, Hayes' own radio squawked with an incoming transmission. American forces at FOB Sandstorm. We are here for the helicopter pilot, Major Kaine. Send her out alone, and we will leave the rest of you unharmed. You have 5 minutes to comply. Hayes looked at Alexis. Ma'am, I don't think we're going to be able to talk our way out of this one. No, Lieutenant. I don't think we are. Alexis keyed her own radio. Unknown forces, this is Major Kaine. I'm not going anywhere. If you want me, you're going to have to come get me. But I should warn you, That's probably not going to work out the way you're hoping." The response was immediate. The 6 vehicles surged forward, their occupants opening fire with automatic weapons and heavy machine guns. The quiet desert afternoon exploded into chaos. "All positions engage," Hayes shouted. And the FOB's defenders opened fire. The Black Hawk's door gunners added their M240s to the defensive fire, creating intersecting fields of fire that caught the attacking vehicles in a deadly crossfire. The Apache swooped in from above, its 30mm cannon ripping into the lead trucks, but the attackers were well armed and apparently willing to die. They kept coming, some of the vehicles breaking through the initial wall of fire to get close enough to dismount their fighters. Men in a mix of military gear and civilian clothes poured out, taking cover behind berms and wrecked vehicles. Laying down suppressive fire. An RPG streaked across the compound, missing Alexis's grounded helicopter by meters. The explosion sent shrapnel pinging off the aircraft skin. "Reeves!" Alexis shouted. "How's that repair coming?" "Almost done, Major. 2 more minutes." 2 minutes might as well have been 2 hours. The attackers were pushing hard, trying to overwhelm the defenders before reinforcements could arrive. Alexis grabbed an M4 rifle from one of the Rangers and took up a position behind a concrete barrier. Adding her own fire to the defense, Sergeant Cordova appeared beside her, his weapon barking out controlled bursts. "Ma'am, they're trying to flank us on the north side. If they get around our perimeter, they can hit the helicopters. Take 3 men and reinforce that sector. Don't let them through." Cordova disappeared, taking several Rangers with him. The sound of their weapons intensified from the north side of the perimeter as they engaged the flanking force. An explosion rocked the FOB as a mortar round, not Harris's mortar from earlier. But a new threat landed inside the compound. These attackers had brought their own indirect fire support. "Overwatch, can you locate that mortar?" "Scanning now, Chalk 1. Got it single tube. 1,200 meters southwest. Engaging." The Apache rolled into another attack run. And moments later, the mortar position went silent in a ball of flame and smoke, but more attackers kept coming. Whoever Harris had hired for this job, they were committed. Bodies littered the approaches to the FOB, but the assault showed no signs of letting up. "Major," Reeves called out. "Fuel systems fixed. We're good to go." Finally, some good news. "Get that bird started. We're getting out of here." As Reeves scrambled to start the helicopter, Alexis assessed the tactical situation. They needed to create an opening, a moment of confusion that would allow them to lift off without taking catastrophic fire. "Lieutenant Hayes, I need you to concentrate all your heavy weapons on the eastern approach. When I give the word, hit them with everything you've got. Create enough chaos to cover our departure." "Roger that, Major." Alexis keyed the radio to the other helicopters. "All Chalks, prepare for immediate departure. We're leaving in 60 seconds. The Black Hawk's turbines began to whine as Reeves brought the engines online. Alexis sprinted for the aircraft, bullets kicking up dust around her feet. She dove through the door just as Cordova and his Rangers came running back from the northern perimeter, laying down covering fire as they moved. "Now, Lieutenant. Hit them now." Every heavy weapon the FOB possessed opened fire simultaneously. .50 caliber machine guns, grenade launchers, everything they had. The concentrated firepower momentarily staggered the assault. "Go, go, go!" Alexis shouted, hauling herself into the pilot's seat. The 3 remaining Black Hawks lifted off in a thunderous roar of rotors and engine noise, climbing rapidly out of the kill zone. Bullets and RPGs reached up after them, but they were already too high, too fast. As they cleared the FOB's perimeter, Alexis looked back. Lieutenant Hayes and his soldiers were still fighting, holding the line against the remaining attackers. The quick reaction force would reach them soon, but But until then, those 40 soldiers were on their own. Overwatch. Stay with the IFAVOB. Provide close air support until the QRF arrives. Copy. Chalk 1. Good luck. The formation turned southwest, heading for Camp Arifjan at maximum speed. They'd survived another attempt on their lives, but Alexis knew this wasn't over. Harris was still out there, still dangerous, still desperate enough to try anything. And somewhere in the operations center back at base, his unknown accomplice was still feeding him information, still helping him stay one step ahead. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The 3 Black Hawks touched down at Camp Arifjan just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and crimson. Alexis barely waited for the skids to settle before she was out of the aircraft, striding toward the operations center with Tillman and Cordova flanking her. Colonel Drummond met them at the entrance, her face carved from stone. Major Kaine, briefing room, now. The briefing room was packed. Besides Drummond, there were representatives from military intelligence, the Criminal Investigation Command, and even 2 agents from the FBI's Counter-Terrorism Division. The atmosphere was electric with barely contained fury. "Sit down, Major," Drummond said, gesturing to a chair at the head of the conference table. "You've had quite a day." Alexis remained standing. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't have time to sit. Lieutenant Colonel Harris is in the wind. He has at least one accomplice still operating inside this base, and he just tried to kill me and my crew for the 3rd time today. We need to be hunting him, not debriefing." One of the FBI agents, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair, spoke up. "Major Kaine, I'm Special Agent Diana Foster. We've been tracking Harris's financial activities for the past 6 hours, ever since Colonel Drummond alerted us to the situation. You're right that he's fled, but he won't get far." "How can you be sure?" Foster pulled up a screen showing bank transaction records. "Because Harris made a critical mistake. When he realized Nightingale had escaped with evidence against him, he panicked and tried to withdraw everything from his accounts, both his legitimate military pay accounts and the offshore accounts where he'd been hiding his payoffs. That triggered automatic alerts in our financial monitoring systems. Where is he now?" His last known location was the civilian airport in Kuwait City, approximately 2 hours ago. He was attempting to board a flight to Dubai using a false passport. Airport security detained him when the passport triggered an alert. Alexis felt a surge of grim satisfaction. "So he's in custody." Foster's expression darkened. "He was. 20 minutes ago, there was an incident at the airport detention facility. 2 men claiming to be American embassy officials arrived to collect Harris. They had what appeared to be legitimate credentials and transfer orders. The Kuwaiti security officers released him into their custody. Let me guess, they weren't really embassy officials." "Correct. We're working with Kuwaiti authorities now to track down the vehicle they used, but it's likely Harris is already out of the country. His terrorist network contacts are protecting him." Drummond slammed her hand on the table. "Which means we have a traitor who sold out American operations, got American soldiers killed, and is now going to disappear into some safe haven where we can't touch him." "Not necessarily." "Ma'am," said one of the military intelligence officers. "A captain named Robert Chun." "Wait, that name again." "Captain Robert Lindsay. Harris may have escaped physical custody, but Nightingale's evidence is devastating. We've already begun tracing every piece of intelligence he had access to, every mission he compromised. We're building a case that will ensure he can never work with any legitimate government or organization again." "That's not justice," Alexis said flatly. "That's paperwork." "Major," Foster interjected, "I understand your frustration, but there's more at stake here than just Harris. The intelligence Nightingale brought back has opened up an entirely new front in our counter-terrorism operations. The terrorist financing network Harris was working with has tentacles throughout the Middle East and into Europe. We're talking about a multinational operation that's been running for years. Drummond stood and walked to a large display screen. Major Kaine, while you were fighting for your life at Phobe Sandstorm, our intelligence analysts were going through Nightingale's data. What they found is staggering. The screen lit up with an organizational chart that looked like a spider's web. Names, faces, financial connections all linked together in a complex network that spanned multiple countries and organizations. This network, Drummond continued, has been facilitating not just terrorist financing, but also the recruitment and corruption of military and intelligence personnel from multiple NATO countries. Harris wasn't an isolated case. He was one of at least 15 individuals we've identified so far who were selling information to this network. Alexis stared at the chart, feeling a chill run down her spine. 15 traitors. How many operations were compromised? How many people died because of them? We're still assessing the damage, Captain Lindsay said. But preliminary analysis suggests dozens of operations were affected over the past 2 years. Ambushed patrols, compromised intelligence sources, failed raids, all because someone on the inside was feeding information to the enemy. And Harris's accomplice here on base? Alexis asked. The person who helped him forge orders and sabotage my aircraft? Drummond's expression was grim. We're conducting a full security sweep of everyone who had access to the operations center during the relevant time periods. But Major, that's over 200 personnel. It's going to take time to identify the mole. Time we may not have. If Harris's accomplice realizes we're onto them, they'll either destroy evidence or flee just like Harris did. Special Agent Foster nodded. Which is why we're implementing immediate security measures. No one enters or leaves this base without authorization. All communications are being monitored. And we've set up a joint task force to investigate everyone who might be involved. I want to be part of that task force, Alexis said immediately. Major, you've been up for over 30 hours, Drummond replied. You've been shot at, nearly blown up, and forced to make 3 emergency landings. You need rest. What I need, ma'am, is to find the person who tried to kill my crew and my rangers. Sleep can wait. Drummond studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, Major, you're on the task force. But I want you to work with Special Agent Foster. This is her area of expertise. Over the next 6 hours, Alexis and Foster worked through personnel files, access logs, and communication records. They were looking for patterns who had access to the operations center at the right times, who had the technical skills to forge orders and manipulate mission planning databases, who might have had contact with Harris. The investigation was painstaking and frustrating. Every lead seemed to branch into multiple possibilities, each one requiring hours of follow-up work. Alexis could feel exhaustion creeping up on her, but she pushed it aside. Somewhere in these files was the person who had helped Harris, and she was going to find them. Major, look at this, Foster said, pulling up a new set of records. I've been analyzing the metadata on those forged orders. The digital signature was created using a specific encryption key that's only issued to senior intelligence personnel. How many people have access to that key? On this base? 12 people. But of those 12, only 3 were on duty during the time window when the orders were created. Foster pulled up 3 personnel files. Alexis scanned the names and photos. Captain Jennifer Walsh, intelligence analyst with 8 years of service. Major Thomas Peterson, operations officer with 12 years of experience. And Chief Warrant Officer 2 Rachel Morrison, signals intelligence specialist with 6 years in the military. Any of them have financial irregularities? Connections to Harris? That's the problem. None of them show obvious red flags. No unusual bank deposits, no known personal relationships with Harris, nothing that would immediately suggest corruption. Alexis studied the 3 files more carefully. What about their access patterns? When did they log into the system? What files did they access? Foster brought up access logs. Walsh accessed the mission planning database 17 times in the week before your operation. Peterson accessed it 9 times. Morrison only accessed it twice. What about after the forged orders were created? Did any of them go back to cover their tracks? Foster's fingers flew across the keyboard. Good thinking. Major, let me check ... Yes. Someone accessed the mission planning database 3 hours after your helicopter took off, and they deleted several log files. The access came from Chief Warrant Officer Morrison's terminal. But that doesn't necessarily mean Morrison did it. Someone could have used her terminal while she was away. True, but there's something else. Foster pulled up Morrison's personnel file again. 6 months ago, Morrison requested a transfer to a different unit. The request was denied due to her critical skills being needed here. That denial came from Lieutenant Colonel Harris. Alexis felt pieces clicking together. So Harris denied her transfer request, which would have given him leverage over her. Help me with this, and I'll approve your transfer. Classic recruitment technique. And look at this. Morrison's bank records show a cash deposit of $5,000, 2 weeks after her transfer request was denied. No clear source for the money. That's not proof, but it's enough to bring her in for questioning. Foster reached for her radio, but Alexis stopped her. Wait, if we bring her in now and she's not the mole, we tip off the real accomplice that we're getting close. And if she is the mole, she might have a dead man switch, some way to destroy evidence or alert Harris that she's been compromised. So what do you suggest? We watch her. Put surveillance on her movements. Monitor her communications. If she is Harris's accomplice, she's going to be nervous now that he's fled. Nervous people make mistakes. Foster nodded slowly. I'll coordinate with base security. We'll put a discreet tail on Morrison starting immediately. As they made the arrangements, Alexis's mind was already racing ahead. If Morrison was the mole, what else might she have compromised? What other operations might be at risk? And most importantly, did she know where Harris had fled to? The investigation was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare had begun, Alexis felt like they were finally getting ahead of the enemy. Instead of constantly reacting to their moves, her secure phone buzzed. It was a text from Cordova. Major, you need to see this. Morrison just left her quarters carrying a large bag. She's heading for the vehicle depot. Alexis and Foster exchanged glances and were on their feet immediately, running for the door. If Morrison was trying to flee, they had only minutes to stop her before she disappeared like Harris had. The vehicle depot was on the far side of the base. A 15-minute walk, but only 3 minutes by vehicle. Foster commandeered a Humvee, and they raced across the compound, Alexis's hand resting on her sidearm. They arrived to find Cordova and 2 of his rangers standing near the depot entrance. She's inside, Major. Hasn't come out yet. Alexis approached the depot carefully, Foster and the rangers backing her up. Inside the large garage, vehicle engines echoed off the metal walls. Alexis spotted Morrison near a parked civilian SUV, loading bags into the trunk. Chief Warrant Officer Morrison, Alexis called out, her voice carrying across the garage. Step away from the vehicle. Morrison spun around, her face going pale when she saw Alexis and the armed rangers. For a moment, Alexis thought she might run. But instead, Morrison's shoulders sagged in defeat. I knew someone would figure it out eventually, Morrison said quietly. I just hoped I'd have more time. 6 months had passed since Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Morrison's arrest at the vehicle depot. The interrogation room where she'd confessed everything had been just the beginning of a cascade that would reshape military intelligence operations. Across 3 continents, Alexis stood at the window of her new office at the Pentagon. Watching snow fall over Washington, D.C., the view was a far cry from the desert heat of Kuwait. but she still found herself scanning the horizon out of habit, looking for threats that weren't there. "Colonel Kaine?" A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Your briefing starts in 10 minutes. Colonel." The promotion had come through 3 weeks ago, along with her assignment to lead the newly formed Counterintelligence Protection Division. Her mission: prevent another Harris situation from ever happening again. She grabbed her briefing folder and headed to the conference room. The space was filled with officers from across the military intelligence community, all gathered to hear the final assessment of Operation Nightfall's aftermath, the name they'd given to the investigation that had consumed the past half-year. General Drummond, now promoted herself and serving on the Joint Chiefs, stood at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, 6 months ago, Major Alexis Kaine, now Colonel Kaine, prevented what would have been the most catastrophic intelligence breach in modern military history. Today, we're here to review what we've learned and how we've changed our operations to prevent similar incidents." The screen behind Drummond lit up with statistics that still made Alexis's stomach turn. 43 compromised operations. 17 American service members killed due to intelligence sold by Harris and his network. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments to traitors who had sworn oaths to defend their country. Chief Warrant Officer Morrison's cooperation has been invaluable, Drummond continued. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she provided detailed information about how Harris recruited her, how the network operated, and most importantly, how to identify other potential traitors within our ranks. Morrison had broken quickly after her arrest. The pressure of living a double life, the guilt over the deaths she'd helped cause, the fear of spending the rest of her life in military prison, it had all come pouring out in a 36-hour confession that had given investigators everything they needed. She'd explained how Harris had approached her after denying her transfer request, how he'd started with small favors, just looking the other way while he accessed certain files, nothing that seemed too serious, how the requests had escalated gradually until she was forging orders and manipulating databases, how the money had started flowing into her account, making it harder to walk away, even as the scope of the betrayal grew dark by the time Morrison realized she was in too deep. Harris had enough evidence of her complicity to ensure her silence. She'd been trapped, helping facilitate operations that got people killed. Unable to see a way out, Special Agent Foster stepped up to the podium. "The terrorist financing network that Harris was working with has been significantly disrupted. Working with international partners, we've frozen over $40 million in assets, arrested 23 individuals across 7 countries, and dismantled 3 major money laundering operations. But," Foster continued, her expression sobering, "Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Harris remains at large. That was the one failure that still gnawed at Alexis. Despite everything they'd learned, all the resources dedicated to finding him, Harris had vanished. Intelligence suggested he was somewhere in Southeast Asia, possibly Malaysia or Indonesia, living under an assumed identity with money he'd managed to hide before his accounts were frozen. However," Foster said, "Harris is a man without a country. His U.S. citizenship has been revoked. Interpol has issued a red notice. Every intelligence service in the Western Alliance is looking for him. He's living in exile, unable to work, unable to return home, constantly looking over his shoulder. In many ways, that's a worse punishment than prison." Alexis wasn't so sure about that, but she kept her thoughts to herself. Drummond resumed her presentation. "The most important outcome of this incident has been the systematic overhaul of our security protocols. Colonel Kaine, would you brief us on the new measures your division has implemented?" Alexis stood and walked to the front of the room. Public speaking to senior officers had once intimidated her. Now, after everything she'd been through, it felt almost routine. The Counterintelligence Protection Division has implemented a multi-layered approach to preventing insider threats. She began. First, we've established enhanced vetting procedures for anyone with access to sensitive operational planning. This includes regular polygraph examinations, financial audits, and behavioral assessments. She pulled up a slide showing the new organizational structure. Second, we've created a redundancy system where no single individual can alter mission-critical information without secondary verification. The forged orders that Captain Brennan received would now trigger automatic alerts before they could be distributed. Third, we've established an anonymous reporting system where service members can report suspicious activity without fear of reprisal. We've learned that several people had concerns about Harris's behavior but didn't report it because they didn't want to accuse a superior officer without proof. The briefing continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the new security architecture. When it finally concluded, officers filed out, some stopping to congratulate Alexis on her promotion and her work rebuilding trust in the intelligence system. As the room emptied, Drummond approached. "Colonel, walk with me." They strolled through the Pentagon's corridors, past walls lined with photographs of military history. Drummond was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Alexis, I need to tell you something I haven't shared with anyone else. When you refused to board that Black Hawk without showing your credentials, when you challenged those sergeants who were just following what they thought were legitimate orders in that moment, you saved more than just Nightingale's life. You saved the integrity of this entire institution." "Ma'am, I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing much more than that. You were demonstrating the kind of moral courage that we talk about in leadership courses but rarely see in practice. You risked your career, your reputation, everything, because you knew something was wrong and you weren't willing to let it slide." They stopped in front of a memorial wall dedicated to service members who had given their lives in the war on terror. Some of those names, Alexis now knew, represented people who had died because of Harris's betrayal. "I've been in the military for 32 years, Drummond continued. "I've seen courage in combat. I've seen tactical brilliance. I've seen incredible feats of physical endurance. But the rarest form of courage is what you showed that day, the courage to stand up to your own side when you know they're wrong. Someone had to, ma'am. Lieutenant Colonel Santos tried to expose the conspiracy and was killed for it. I couldn't let her sacrifice be meaningless. Santos would be proud of you." "Hell, I'm proud of you." Drummond turned to face her directly. "Which is why I'm assigning you to something even more challenging than running the Counterintelligence Protection Division." Alexis felt a familiar sense of anticipation. "What kind of assignment, ma'am?" "We've received intelligence that suggests the terrorist financing network Harris worked with wasn't just recruiting American military personnel. They've also been targeting NATO allies, intelligence services, even defense contractors. The conspiracy was bigger than we initially realized." "How much bigger?" "Big enough that it's going to take a multinational task force to dismantle it completely. I want you to lead that task force. You'll be working with counterintelligence officers from Britain, France, Germany, and a dozen other countries. Your mission is to identify every compromised individual, trace every financial connection, and shut down the entire network permanently." Alexis felt the weight of the assignment settling on her shoulders, but also a sense of purpose. This was the work that mattered, not just catching individual traitors, but dismantling the systems that created them. "When do I start, ma'am?" "Monday. Your team is already being assembled. You'll have access to resources and authority that most colonels never see. But Alexis, I need you to promise me something." "Ma'am?" "Don't lose yourself in this work. What you've been through, the ambushes, the betrayals, nearly dying multiple times, that takes a toll. I've seen too many good officers burn out because they couldn't let go of the mission long enough to take care of themselves. I'll be careful, ma'am. See that you are. Because we need you for the long haul, not just for one spectacular operation." That evening, Alexis returned to her temporary quarters in Arlington. Her apartment was still mostly unpacked boxes stacked in corners, furniture in the wrong places. She'd been too busy with the investigation and the transition to her new role to properly settle in. Her phone buzzed with an incoming video call. It was her younger sister, Lieutenant Emily Kaine, currently serving as a helicopter pilot stationed in Germany. "Hey, big sister," Emily said when the call connected. "I heard about your promotion." "Colonel Kaine, that has a nice ring to it." "Thanks, Em. How's Germany treating you?" "Cold and boring, which after hearing about your adventures in Kuwait, sounds pretty good to me." "Seriously, Alex, when I read the classified briefing about what happened, I couldn't believe it. You always were the crazy one in the family." Alexis smiled. Emily had been her inspiration for becoming a pilot, watching her younger sisters. Natural talent in the cockpit had pushed Alexis to be better, to take more risks, to never settle for good enough. Someone had to keep things interesting. "Well, you definitely succeeded at that. Mom called me yesterday. She's terrified you're going to get yourself killed doing this counterintelligence work. Tell Mom I'm fine. The dangerous part is over. Now it's mostly paperwork and coordination with allies." "And when has anything involving you ever been mostly paperwork?" They talked for another 20 minutes, catching up on family news and military gossip. When the call ended, Alexis felt more grounded than she had in months. Emily had that effect, a reminder that there was life beyond the mission, family beyond the military. She opened her laptop and pulled up the preliminary briefing for the multinational task force. Files upon files of suspected conspirators, financial transactions, and intelligence assessments. The work ahead would be enormous, potentially taking years to complete. But as Alexis reviewed the material, she found herself thinking about the moment that had started everything, standing on that tarmac at Camp Arifjan, facing down two sergeants who wouldn't let her board her own helicopter. In that moment, she could have backed down, could have assumed there was a legitimate explanation, could have let someone else fly the mission. Instead, she demanded to see Colonel Drummond. She'd questioned the orders. She'd insisted on the truth. That single act of defiance had saved lives, exposed a massive conspiracy, and ultimately changed her entire career trajectory. It had proven something that Lieutenant Colonel Santos had died trying to demonstrate, that individual courage mattered, that one person willing to stand up could make a difference, that the system could be reformed from within if people cared enough to fight for it. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a courier holding a small package. "Colonel Kaine? This was delivered for you." She signed for it and closed the door. The package had no return address, just her name and rank. Inside was a small wooden box. When she opened it, she found a pair of pilot's wings, old, tarnished, clearly well-worn. There was a note tucked underneath. "These belong to Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos. Her family wanted you to have them, as thanks for finishing the work she started and ensuring her sacrifice meant something. Fly well, Colonel. The sky needs guardians like you." Alexis held the wings carefully, feeling the weight of history and responsibility in the small piece of metal. Santos had given her life trying to expose the conspiracy. Nightingale had risked everything to gather evidence. Morrison had finally found the courage to tell the truth. Drummond had trusted her instincts when it would have been easier to dismiss them. None of them had been perfect. All of them had made mistakes. But when it mattered most, they'd chosen to do the right thing, regardless of the cost. Alexis pinned Santos's wings to her uniform jacket, next to her own. They would serve as a daily reminder of why this work mattered, why fighting corruption and betrayal was worth the personal sacrifice it demanded. Her phone buzzed. Again, a message from Special Agent Foster. "Task Force preliminary meeting scheduled for 0800 Monday. Bring coffee. This is going to be a long campaign." Alexis smiled and typed back, "Copy that. See you Monday." She closed her laptop and walked to the window, looking out over the city lights of Washington. Somewhere out there, Nathan Harris was hiding, trying to stay ahead of the hunt. Somewhere, other traders were still operating, selling out their countries for money. Somewhere, terrorist networks were still trying to corrupt and compromise the people sworn to defend against them. But also somewhere out there were people, like Drummond, like Foster, like Nightingale, like the Rangers who had stood by her in the firefight. People who believed that integrity mattered, that oaths meant something, that the hard right was better than the easy wrong. The fight would continue. New threats would emerge. The work would never truly be finished. But standing there in her new office, wearing the wings of a fallen hero, Colonel Alexis Kaine was ready for whatever came next. Because sometimes, the most important thing a soldier can do is refuse to follow an order. And sometimes, that refusal can change everything. Thank you for following this incredible journey of courage, sacrifice, and justice. What did you think of Colonel Kaine's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring military stories. Which part resonated most with you? The tarmac confrontation, the desert firefight, or the final resolution? Let me know, and I'll bring you more thrilling tales of heroes who stood up when it mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.